Hey guys, thanks for checking out my video. It's finally here. I'm excited to cover the Stormburst Archmage build guide. So let's get into it. Here's what we're going to cover in this video. First, I'm going to do a showcase, show you a map and a boss. Then I'm going to talk about how the skill works because Stormburst is one of the more complicated skills in PoE. And I'm going to talk about the importance of how to scale it with duration, AoE, and cast speed. I'll talk about how Archmage works and how we take advantage of it with Arcane Cloak, how to manage mana cost, how to scale energy shield or life, mind over matter, and then talk about cast speed, tree, gear, gems, and some other stuff. So let's get into it. First, I'm going to show you a boss showcase and a mapping showcase. I'm just going to run this Minotaur real quick. Minotaur is you know, not the greatest showcase map these days, but it'll give you a good sense of the mapping speed, and then a little bit of sense of the boss damage. So you map clear with basically just Frostblink, which has a very low cooldown because we stack so much cast speed, or it has no cooldown, but the speed of it is based on your cast speed. Since we stack a lot of cast speed, you can pretty much clear entire maps with just this. So the mapping speed is insanely fast. If there's a rare that's tanky or an exile like this or something, you can just storm burst him for a second, and he'll die. Channel on that guy. Even rares like that one you can kill with the storm burst. Oh rats, I need that. Tanky rare like this, channel for a second, he's dead. Keep going. Rogue exile, channel for a second, he's dead. Channel for a second, he's dead. Channel for a second, he's dead. And there you go. We're at the boss. Super good mapping. And then here's the bossing. I'll stand still and tank Minotaur. He's going to die pretty fast, though. And there you go. There's Minotaur. Map done. One more clip I'll show you. This is from Shaper here. You can tank a lot of stuff on this build as long as you're able to channel. So on Shaper here, you can see we can even tank a Shaper beam as long as we're able to channel because of our ES leech. And then you can see his health is going down pretty quick, so boss damage is okay. It's not really enough to do Ubers very easily unless you pumped a ton of money into the build. Then maybe you could do Ubers, but that's not really what the build's designed for. So there you go. How the skill works. Okay, I'm going to talk about this for a bit. Stormburst, when you channel, you create orbs based on your cast speed. So with a 2.25 second cast speed, you'll create 4 orbs per second. And then the orbs jump around every 0.4 seconds, randomly around the target. Base duration's 1.2, goes up to 1.6 with quality. So that means each orb is going to jump 4 times, once every 0.4 seconds. Base, but you have to scale that. So here's how it works. You start channeling right here, orb will spawn, it'll bounce, 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 bounce every 0.4 seconds with no scaling. And then after the final burst, after 1.6 seconds, the orb will disappear. But you scale duration. For every 0.4 seconds of duration that you have, the orb will jump an additional time. So for example, if you get up to 2.8 second duration, your orb will jump again, and then again, and again. And then after 2.8 seconds, it will disappear. And this is one orb. Okay. Now for AoE, the reason AoE is important is because all these orbs that bounce, you want them to overlap on your central target point. So with no AoE, they won't really do that like this on Doidra here. But then if you do scale AoE, you can see the difference. With some AoE, you can get every single orb to overlap on the center target, and your single target damage will be way, way higher. So here's the AoE with no scaling over here, and then over here on the right, this is what your AoE will look like with AoE scaling. And I have a video here to demonstrate what that looks like. So here on the right, you have a Stormburst with no AoE, and you can see the center point here around the mouse would be the target. That's Doidri's corpse there. And then if you see some of the orbs out on the edges, like this one right here, this orb is so far away that it's not going to hit that target because you don't have enough AoE scaling. But then if you look on the left over here, this has massive AoE scaling, and so no matter where the orbs explode, they're going to hit the center because they have so much AoE overlap. So AoE is very, very important for scaling the build, for both clear speed and single target damage. Here's another way to think about this. When you channel Stormburst, there's an invisible ring that the orbs jump around inside. And you need your AoE to be big enough so that no matter where they jump to, they'll still hit the center. So if you look at this small one here, with no AoE, if it spawns on the outside of that ring, it's not going to hit the center, so it's not going to hit the target. But if you have the AoE, even if it spawns on the outside edge, it will still hit the center. And that's what you're going for. And here's kind of that same visual over what it looks like in-game. If an orb spawns all the way over here on the edge, it's still going to hit the target because of how big the AoE is. You can kind of see the ring of this ring right here will be big enough to hit your target. So here's where you get it all. Most of it comes from the tree and from your Ascendancy. Hierophant and all these 3 AoE clusters right here. I take all 3 of them. I think they're worth it. And they also help Frostblink clear a lot too. Sanctuary of Thought gives you huge AoE with mana too. As long as you have 5,000 mana, you'll have 100% increased AoE from this, which is huge. Cast speed is also very, very important. We stack cast speed everywhere. The more cast speed you have, the more orbs you're going to shoot out. The orbs shoot out based on what your cast time is. So with a 0.09 cast time, you will shoot out a new orb every 0.09 seconds. So the maximum amount of orbs you can have is your duration of the skill divided by your cast time. So if you have a 3.6 second duration, for example, you get to 40 orbs. But if you only have 1.6 seconds, then you only get to 17 orbs. So you can see the difference there between duration scaling. It'll also make your Frostblink a lot faster, which is where the mapping quality of life comes from. And here's where you get all your cast speed. You get it from your wand, flask, rings, a lightning golem, a lot of it on the tree, amulet, some jewels. You pretty much stack cast speed everywhere you can get it. Okay, I'll go over Archmage now. Stormburst doesn't have an orb tag, so you can actually use it with Archmage, even though Archmage says it can't support orb skills, and Stormburst specifically says it shoots orbs, but it doesn't have the orb tag for some reason. Stormburst only gets 35 effectiveness of added damage, unfortunately, but it's still the strongest gem there is if you stack mana. It's a 76% more damage gem, which is still pretty insane. So you get 20% of your max mana as lightning at level 21. So big mana equals big damage. It's also big survivability because of Arcane Cloak, and I'll talk more about that later. There's a big downside to Archmage though, which is it makes Stormburst cost a ton of mana. So you have to stack reduced mana cost in order to sustain it. If you don't have any, your Stormburst is going to cost like 12,000 mana per second, and you're going to run out of mana instantly pretty much. So you have to stack reduced mana cost in all these places here. You can get your mana cost down to almost nothing by getting 97% reduced mana cost from all these things here, and then you also get 50% less from Hierophant, from Sanctuary of Thought. Here's all the places you get reduced mana. There's reduced mana on the Mana Mastery, on this ES wheel here, and then these 3 nodes right here on the tree, plus this wheel here, and then Hierophant. And then you also need to craft it on both your rings, and then also use Inspiration, which is where a lot of it comes from. You do want to have some mana cost though, because if you don't have any mana cost, then you won't gain Inspiration charges, and then you also won't gain any benefit from Arcane Capacitor. So you want to get your mana cost down to as little as possible, but still having some mana cost. So if you have a mana cost per second of about 250, which is what mine is, but then you have mana regen of about almost 900, you'll still have a net regen of about 600 left over, and that's what you want. You want to have enough regen left over after your cost so that your mana will be back to full by the time your Arcane Cloak cooldown comes up again. That's very important. So I'll show you what that looks like here. If you look at my mana pool here, even if I'm channeling, my mana is still going up at a pretty good pace. And then here comes my Arcane Cloak cooldown. There's my Arcane Cloak proc, and you can see my mana is still going up even though I'm channeling constantly. And so I've got more than enough regen that by the time my Arcane Cloak comes up again, my mana will be full, and that's what you want. As long as your mana is full by the time your Arcane Cloak comes up, then that's pretty much enough regen. Arcane Cloak is very important for offense and defense. You use automation support with it and increased duration. Your uptime on it will be about 70%. So it'll be up almost all the time as long as you don't take a big damage chunk that knocks it off. So I go low life with Ivory Tower and Prism Guardian, which is a very, very powerful combination. Going Prism Guardian gives you the ability to use Pain Attunement because you can go low life, and going low life with auras lets you use Discipline, which kind of makes up for the energy shield that you lose from reserving the life. And then you also get to use Wrath, which is big damage, and then I chose to go with Arctic Armor, which is for big tankiness and utility. And then Prism Guardian gives you 37 all res, which is pretty powerful also. And then Ivory Tower gives you a nice chaos res, or a nice chaos damage defensive layer too, because all your mana pool will protect you against chaos damage. So it's very, very strong. You can go life scaling though instead. I'm also playing an SSF, by the way. So if you go life, you could scale it pretty well doing that as well. And then you could take way more advantage of Mind Over Matter. So Mind Over Matter only works with damage that you take from life. It doesn't work with damage you take from Energy Shield. So if you reserve all your life, then Mind Over Matter will do almost nothing. And so I'm not even using it right now. You can see for my build, it's only less than 2% max hit. But if I had more life, that's with 85 life reserved. But if I only had 45% of my life reserved, it would give me 6% more max hit. So the less life you have, the more you get from Mind Over Matter. Or the opposite, I mean, sorry. The less life you have, the less benefit you get from Mind Over Matter. So you don't really need it if you're going low life. If you go a life version, you can take big advantage of Mind Over Matter. The cast speed mastery gives you 6% cast speed per spell. And so this synergizes really well with Sigil of Power and Frost Shield and Frostblink. So if you use all three of those things right before you start channeling, you're going to get 24% cast speed when you start, and that'll help you get all your orbs out really quick and build up big burst damage and big recovery from Leech too. Sigil and Frost Shield are both very powerful defensive layers too. Sigil, once Sigil's charged, it's like having 24 stacks of Fortify. And then Frost Shield on top is having like another guard skill almost, like Arcane Cloak. Alright, so let's talk about some of the defensive layers on the build. You have to get stun immunity. If you don't, you're going to get interrupted during your cast, which is catastrophic. So pretty much the best way to get it is to take these two wheels here. Conjured Barrier and Practical Application. If you take both of those, you'll be stun immune while you're casting. So as long as you're casting, even if you're frost blinking, you'll be stun immune because you're during a casting animation. Or if you're channeling, you'll be stun immune. But you could still be stunned if you're running, or if you're walking, but you're not really doing that very often. We get almost 100% crit reduction on the build through a Determination Watcher's Eye, and then this note on the tree, Sanctum of Thought, gives you another 30% reduced damage from crits. And then you can get to 100% if you use these Rongo Kurai turtle tattoos. I haven't found enough of these yet in SSF to get crit immune, but I am 90% crit reduction, which is pretty strong. Some other defensive layers on the build. You get big armor from Determination and Flask. Sigil gives you big less damage taken. You get perma endurance charges from Hierophant. Some Fizz taken as mastery. Infused channeling gives you 8% less damage taken. Arctic Armor gives you another 21%. You get 10% less Fizz on full energy shield from the ES mastery. LE damage taken from Lunaris. Fizz reduction from Tukohama, Pantheon, which is optional. If you're running Exarch altars, I would take Aberath though. And then Arcane Cloak and Frost Shield give you huge shields. I've got 82% chance to avoid regular bleeds and completely immune to corrupted blood from a jewel. And then Vol Cold Snap freezes stuff around you too, which is another helpful defensive layer sometimes. For elemental ailments, we're freeze immune from Arctic Armor, chill immune from boots. You can get shock reduction on a flask and jewels or a glovecraft if you want. Or you could use the Gorukan Pantheon. Ignite. If you run Aberath, you get 60% less from that. And then the rest of it, you don't really have to be too concerned about because of your leech. Your recovery is so high that Ignites do almost nothing to you. But if you do want to go for full ailment immunity, I'd probably go Storm Shroud with boots and Abyss Jewel shock avoidance. That's the best way to probably get it. The most important defensive layer, though, is the instant leech on the build. So the instant leech mastery here is mandatory. You have to take this. You will have over 10,000 ES leech per second, instant leech, because all your orbs hitting, you got 40 or 50 orbs all pulsing, every second. You're going to hit 100 times a second. And so your ES recovery, that's how you're able to tank that Shaper Beam, because of your ES leech. So make sure you get this instant mastery. I run a trigger setup on my wand for conductivity, lightning golem, and cold snap. Cold snap will give you frenzy charges while you're mapping. It'll just go off automatically while you're frost blinking around. Lightning golem will stay up all the time for cast speed, and then conductivity will be a single target curse. The AOE is so big it almost covers the entire screen. You don't have to use trigger setup. I just did this because the build already has kind of a lot of buttons, and I didn't want to press more, so that's optional. I'll go over my gear real quick. So my wand, I've got mana, spell damage, cast speed. Those are your top priorities. And then trigger is optional. And then whatever other damage you can get on there would be good. Mana regen is okay, but it's not required. Mind Spiral helmet gives you a ton of energy shield, a little bit of recoup. Very good helmet. My amulet, I got +1 with cast speed. And then mana, energy shield. Pretty much you want to stack cast speed, mana, and those are your two top priorities, pretty much. Cast speed and mana, everywhere you can get it. And then you just fill in the rest with resists, whatever kind of +1 damage you can get. Prism Guardian. Rings are both Cerulean rings with cast speed, and then some attributes, energy shield. And then you have to put on this reduced mana cost craft on both rings. If you don't have that craft on, even losing one of those crafts will make your mana cost so high that you won't be able to sustain your mana. Then Ivory Tower, there's a lot of good double corrupt options here. I'm probably going to go for a double corrupt soon on one of my spare ones. And then gloves, you want to do Unnerve for your implicit. The other one, Fizz converted to lightning, is only a little bit of damage because you have 90% conversion already. You get 50 from the gem, and then you can get another 40 from this mastery right here. So this 10% is the last 100% conversion, but that's kind of optional. You could do exposure there if you don't have awakened awakened lightning pen. You get exposure from this. If you don't have that gem though, you can put it here instead. You also take this mastery right here for 18% exposure, which is very strong. And then for the belt, just resists and mana as much as you can get. Jewel, same thing, mana, energy shield. I got a void bleed there, and a void bleed on the boots too gives me a nice amount of avoid bleeding. You want to use action speed here because that'll just make everything you do faster, and then as much mana resists as possible. And then avoid chill, makes you chill immune on the boots. That's it for the gear, I guess. And then flasks, you got armor flask with shock effect, the sulfur flask with armor. This will make you give consecrated ground too, which will give you reduced curse effect and damage. And then silver flask with cast speed. This is a lot of cast speed here. Onslaught gives you cast speed, so this is a very strong flask. And Zuri's flask for damage, gives you a little bit cast resist too. And then this flask is kind of an option, or it is optional, but it's an extra layer against chaos damage. If you don't use Ivory Tower, then you kind of have to use this because then you'll have no other way to protect your life against chaos damage. This does give you 5 max fire res too, so it's pretty strong. So there. Let's talk about the rest of the tree real quick. So I'm using Unnatural Instinct right here. It's a very strong spot for it because you get AoE, you get mana, and you get cast speed, and you get duration. So you just get all of everything that you need on this build from this Unnatural. This skill effect mastery here is very, very strong, but then you would lose the duration points if you use the Unnatural, and so this Unnatural is very, very strong. But it is optional. You don't have to use the Unnatural there. Iron Will for damage, Dynamo for guard skill duration. This is very important. Crit reduction here, AoE where I showed you earlier, mana cost here, these nodes for damage and exposure, elemental overload here, this is mandatory, mana here, damage here. Your power charges from Hierophant will be enough crit to keep elemental overload up all the time, so you don't have to scale any additional crit like anywhere. And then stun here, life here, AoE here, mana here, and then AoE here, stun immunity here, pain attunement, and then instant leech. And that's the whole tree. A lot of this stuff is pretty much mandatory, so even though this tree does look kind of weird, I think this is the best way I've figured out how to do it. You probably could optimize this a little bit, especially if you can get more tattoos for crit reduction. Then you don't have to take this, and then you could change the pathing a little bit based on not needing this. You could move this mastery to here. That's what I was doing at first. That's pretty much the tree. For Pantheons, I'm using Lunaris. Pantheons are pretty optional though. and Aberrath if you're running Exarch altars. If you're not doing Exarch altars, I'd probably run Tukohama. This will give you a bunch more phase reduction while you're standing still, and because you are standing still kind of a lot on this build when you're fighting dangerous stuff, especially like rituals, ultimatums, harbingers, harvest, anything like that where you stand still. This build's very strong against. For leveling, I recommend Hollow Palm if you can. If not, you can do whatever you want. I just leveled with Stormburst the whole time, which I just liked the skill, so it was fun for me, but you don't have to do that. You can use Arc or whatever. Archmage is really hard to sustain the mana at first, so just you don't even have to use Archmage until later. I didn't even put Archmage on until I was like level 75 or something. And yeah, that's about it, I think. I might have forgot to cover some stuff, but that's the gist of the build. I'll link the POB down in the description. You guys can check it out. If you have any questions, come by the stream, twitch.tv/ZishPOE, and you can ask there. So that's it. Hope you guys have fun. Thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.